Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jeffrey Epstein Show. I'm your host, Bobbycapucci, and this is a morning update. Well, folks, I woke up this morning, took a look at the podcast numbers, and wouldn't you know, we cracked 1 million downloads. It's crazy for me to think that this podcast has been downloaded 1 million times in total. Especially considering this podcast was never more than just myself and my producer saying that something was obviously going on, something was wrong in this case, and we wanted to take a look at it. We basically thought it would be our friends listening, right? A few people, maybe some family members, maybe a couple of people would stumble upon it and give us two knuckleheads a chance to yap in their ear for a little while. Well, fast forward to today, and we're sitting on over 1 million downloads now. And it's been a wild ride from the beginning. For those of you who have been around from the start, you've been around since it's been a wild ride, right? Since it's been bumpy, since I've been, finding my way as a host. This is all new to me as well. I've never anchored a podcast on my own like this before. I've never carried a program on my own before. I've been a co-host on several podcasts. I've also been on the regular radio, but never discussing something heavy like this. I've always been there discussing wagering on sports, or sports in general has always been what I've discussed on podcasts or the radio, and I've always had co-hosts. This podcast, on the other hand, I have been running anchor on it and doing everything myself. So it's been a different experience, and it's been quite the ride as I've grown from where I was from the very first podcast into the host that I have become today. And I just want to thank all of you for riding with me during this wild ass ride and the ups and downs, the growing pains, etc., etc. It takes a lot for somebody to commit to long form entertainment like a podcast. And the fact that all of you have committed your most precious commodity time and time again, which is your time, it's humbling to me that you would spend your life minutes with me and my beard here on the podcast, because I don't look at myself as some kind of I'm a podcast host. I look at myself as just one of you, right? Just a normal run-of-the-mill person. In fact, I state all the time, I'm just your run-of-the-mill moron. And I just happened to have a big fat mouth attached to my beard, and I decided to let it run a little bit on this podcast. And we ended up here. 1 million downloads. And honestly, folks, it's all about you, right? I could sit here till I'm blue in the face and talk about whatever the hell it is I'm talking about. But if you're not engaged with it, if you're not entertained by it, then you're not going to download it. You're not going to listen to it. So I'm glad that you enjoy my antics. I'm glad that you enjoy my 99% of the time sarcasm. And most importantly, I'm glad that you have taken an interest in this case to help us bring justice to the people who so terribly wronged these survivors. And really, at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. It's not about the download numbers. It's not about how many people are liking your posts on Twitter or Facebook. At the end of the day, for me, the only thing that matters is justice in this case. And if my voice amplifying what occurred brings us even just a little bit closer to that, then I can go to bed at night knowing that the effort I put in on a daily basis is worthwhile. Because I think that in a society such as ours, if we can't protect the most vulnerable amongst us, if we can't protect young girls and women from sex trafficking rings, then what in the F are we good for? A lot of people choose their battles. A lot of people decide, well, this is the mountain that I'm going to die on. And that is exactly what I have done when it comes to this case. I have went all in, pushed all my chips into the center of the table. And this is all I do, is pursue this case and pursue justice in this case right now. I don't have any other side gigs, none of that. This is what I'm completely focused on. I am focused on bringing you folks the news on a daily basis, the most recent news in regards to this case. And I am in this for pursuit of justice, because that is what really matters. That's why this podcast was started, and that is why you are all listening, right? So again, I want to just thank all of you from the bottom of my heart for all of the epic support I have received from you. I mean, it is just insane. The overwhelming amount of positive email I get in regards to the podcast just blows me away. You know, I would think with a divisive topic such as this, there'd be a lot more people sending me, hateful emails, but that really is just not the case. And it's kind of shocking to me that there isn't more of that. But I guess what it shows is that the message is resounding with people, and people are taking the message to heart. I'm not on here dicking around, right? I'm not on here firing off wild-ass conspiracy theories or anything like that. And look, there's a place for that. There is certainly a forum for that. There is a place for that. And there are discussions that should be had. But that's not going to happen here on this podcast. So I'm just thankful that everybody has jumped on board, that people are into the format we have here, and that everybody seems to continue to enjoy the content that we're putting out. So again, thank you so much. I appreciate all of you. And I plan on rolling through all the way until we get to the very end of this case. So buckle up, folks. The ride has just begun. All right, so our article today, this is an article that gets me pissed off. It's about a player on the Epstein stage who most assuredly deserves a lot of scrutiny and probably a jail cell. Our article today is from ABC News, and the headline is, Judge Delays Questioning of Co-Executor of Jeffrey Epstein's Estate. Author, James Hill. A federal judge in New York has ordered that a deposition of a co-executor of Jeffrey Epstein's estate be postponed while she considers a request from Epstein's alleged accomplice, Ghislaine Maxwell, to put a civil lawsuit on hold. What do you know? What do you know? Do you think that Darren Indyke and Ghislaine Maxwell haven't been in contact? Do you think that they haven't been plotting behind the scenes? Remember when Ghislaine Maxwell said in The Sun about how she's going to sue Jeffrey Epstein's estate so that they would have to defend her, and that Jeffrey Epstein wrote down that he would always defend her as far as money and hiring lawyers, etc., etc.? Well, we're seeing that now rear its ugly head. Darren Indyke, an attorney whose work for Epstein's corporations and charities spans more than 2 decades, was scheduled to be questioned on Wednesday by lawyers for a woman who sued Epstein's estate and Maxwell earlier this year under the pseudonym Jane Doe. And Darren Indyke is very, very, very deeply connected to Jeffrey Epstein. He has his signature all over countless financial transactions. He was basically Epstein's in-house lawyer, folks, right? The guy that was always around if Epstein needed to bounce a legal question off of him, his biggest confidant, and somebody who most assuredly knows where the bodies are buried. Doe's attorneys have argued in court filings that Indyke's testimony is vital to her case and contend that he could provide extremely relevant testimony about her lawsuit. She alleges in her complaint that she was recruited by Epstein and Maxwell in 1994 and sexually assaulted multiple times by Epstein with Maxwell's assistance over a period of several years in Florida, New York, and New Mexico, beginning when she was 13 years old. And Darren Indyke is not just some bystander here, all right? If anybody knows what Epstein was up to, if anybody knows that Epstein was a scummy son of a bitch, it most assuredly is Darren Indyke. And I'm tired of his name not coming up. I'm tired of someone like Darren Indyke being an executor of the estate. How does that even work? How is that even possible? But since Maxwell's arrest last month, Maxwell's lawyers have sought to put Doe's entire civil case on hold, noting that the similarities of Doe's accusations to those of one of the 3 alleged victims referenced in the criminal charges against Maxwell could impact her ability to get a fair trial. I am so glad that Judge Nathan is not buying any of Maxwell's shit. Unfortunately, some of these other judges still seem to be swimming in that disgusting muddy water that Maxwell, Epstein, and Indyke love so much. While Doe's counsel refuses to state whether his client is one of the three accusers in the currently pending Maxwell indictment, there exists substantial overlap in the facts and issues between this civil complaint and the indictment, Maxwell's lawyer, Laura Menninger, wrote to the court last week. And Laura Menninger's another one, right? She is doing everything in her power to slow things down. She is doing everything in her power to make sure that not only Maxwell is safeguarded here, but the secrets that Maxwell keeps are safeguarded as well. The last thing these people want is any sort of discovery. That is not what they're looking for. Up until now, they've been able to intimidate people out of court. They've been able to send private investigators to rummage through your shit. They've been able to put their thumb on you. Well, their power has ceded now, and they can no longer resort to those tricks, so they don't know what to do. Now, all they have left in their playbook is to try and muddy the waters, slow things down, and try and make it look like Maxwell cannot receive a fair trial. That's what they're looking for here. They want loopholes, and it is up to the prosecution and the survivors' lawyers to deny them access to those. Maxwell's request prompted U.S. Magistrate Judge Deborah Freeman to pump the brakes, delaying Indyke's deposition, at least temporarily, while she decides whether Doe's civil case should be stayed during the pendency of Maxwell's criminal case. And the way that this idiot was able to wiggle off of the hook here makes me sick. Menninger's lawyers and Indyke's team were obviously working together behind the scenes here to make this happen. The last thing they want is to have Indyke under oath giving a deposition, because now he sets himself up for a perjury trap, and he could rat on everybody else and blow this shit right out of the water. But no, the scumbag lawyers working behind the scenes together to try and coerce the situation, to try and finesse it. Indyke was selected by Epstein as a co-executor of his estate in a last will and testament Epstein signed 2 days before his death by apparent suicide in jail, where he was awaiting trial on child sex trafficking and conspiracy charges. Indyke, in his capacity as an administrator of the estate, has been named as a defendant in lawsuits filed by more than 30 women against the Epstein estate. You know, it makes me, it's always head-scratching when you see the charges read again, conspiracy charges. Well, you can't conspire by yourself. If you're involved in a conspiracy, that means there are other people involved in your criminal activities. So can we get on with the real overarching conspiracy case here, please? Can somebody drop a RICO case on these people already? But in a letter to court last week, attorney Robert Glassman alleged for the first time that Doe's legal team has reason to believe that Indyke personally has firsthand knowledge of Epstein's relationship with Doe while she was a minor, and even acted on Jeffrey Epstein's behalf to communicate with Doe on several occasions. Folks, this is not new to anyone who has been following the case. We all know that scumbag Indyke was deeply involved with Jeffrey Epstein's crimes. And we know that this man should not get away with it. But somehow, some way, he ends up as an executor of the estate, and he continues to do his shuck and jive routine as he dodges deposition after deposition. When is Indyke going to be brought to justice? Glassman declined to elaborate on the claim when reached by ABC News. Lawyers for the estate and Indyke did not immediately reply to an email request for comment. The 55-year-old Indyke, who has residences in New Jersey and Florida, has been associated with Epstein for at least 20 years, according to public records and legal filings. His name, along with co-executor Richard Kahn, appears on paperwork as an officer for numerous Epstein-related charities and corporations, including several of the shell companies that control most of Epstein's vast wealth and real estate holdings all around the world. So they're in charge of the money laundering operation? Is that what you're telling me here, ABC? That's what ABC's hinting at, but they won't take the leap. Guess what, folks? Here on the Jeffrey Epstein Show, we will take that leap. Darren Indyke, most assuredly, in my opinion, was involved with the money laundering. He most assuredly knew what was going on with these shell companies, and he knew his boss, Jeffrey Epstein, liked little girls. Okay? Go and do your deposition under oath, Indyke, and let's see what the truth really is. But when Epstein came under investigation in Florida for alleged sex crimes against dozens of minor girls, Indyke lent his voice in support of his employer's character. In a letter sent in 2008 by Epstein's criminal defense lawyers to prosecutors in Florida, in which Indyke is identified as general counsel to Jeffrey, that means his in-house lawyer, the guy that's always around him. If something goes wrong, that's the first guy Epstein talks to. And if it's a more serious situation, obviously he escalates it and brings in somebody like Lefcourt, Dershowitz, Ken Starr, etc. But everything first runs through Indyke. He's basically the strainer, right? Indyke is quoted as crediting Epstein for providing emotional support and financial assistance when Indyke and his wife were struggling to start a family. Aw, isn't that nice? Uncle Jeffy helped you and your wife start a family, huh? I mean, there's many ways we can read into that. Like, did Jeffrey Epstein, did he supply the seed for your wife? What does that even mean? He helped start your family. That's kind of a weird quote. Thankfully, after our fifth cycle, my wife and I were blessed with twin daughters, the letter quotes Indyke as saying. Although Jeffrey was adamant that we owed him nothing, Jeffrey honored us by agreeing to be the godfather of our children. Really? The godfather of your children, huh? So he's the godfather of Dubin's kids, he's the godfather of Indyke's kid, but nobody really knew him. We weren't that close to him. We just decided we're going to ask him to be the godfather. Now, in Italian culture, that shit gets no play. If you're the godfather of a kid, it's a very important role. It's not just some name, not some title that you're given. It's a big deal. And I highly suspect that Jeffrey Epstein was very much involved with Indyke's personal life, his children, his wife, etc., as well as the Dubins. After Epstein worked out a plea deal to serve 13 months in a Palm Beach County jail, Indyke was among his first and most frequent visitors, according to logs kept by the county sheriff. And that's definitely a fact. We know that Indyke was visiting him quite a bit. We know that Indyke was basically working as his mouthpiece to the outside world. And Indyke had a lot of special privileges because he was a lawyer. So basically what you have here is a wannabe Don Corleone and Tom Hagen. That's basically what you have going on here. And by setting up a new Florida nonprofit company for which he was identified as Epstein's supervisor, Indyke helped the convicted sex offender gain approval for a lenient work release program that eventually allowed Epstein to leave the jail for up to 16 hours a day, 7 days a week. And now also, we've heard Epstein was abusing girls while he left jail, so shouldn't Indyke hold some of that responsibility? If Indyke is his so-called quote-unquote supervisor, shouldn't Indyke be held responsible for Jeffrey Epstein's actions? Or is it only you and I who are held to a higher standard? The delay of Indyke's deposition is the second time in Doe's lawsuit that a scheduled session for Indyke has been taken off the calendar. Again, somehow this guy seems to wiggle off the hook all the time. He has never been sat down and spoken to under oath ever. Considering his ties to Jeffrey Epstein, you would think that the SDNY would have a nice, shiny, sealed indictment with his name on it waiting for him. And let's hope they do, because this guy needs to be brought to justice. Lawyers for the Epstein estate canceled the first time shortly after Maxwell's arrest, citing the need to consult with her attorney and to settle disputes with Doe's team over a proposed confidentiality agreement before proceeding. And again, folks, remember, keep in mind what we know from previously about Ghislaine Maxwell coming out in the sun and talking about Indyke and Khan and the executors. This is what she was doing. She was threatening them, in my opinion. So we see it now, the behind-the-scenes wrangling between both the lawyers of Maxwell and Indyke working in conjunction to keep getting this deposition delayed. Glassman, Doe's attorney, has repeatedly accused the lawyers of the $655 million Epstein estate of engaging in a concerted and coordinated effort to delay her lawsuit and to steer her claims into a private victims' compensation fund established by the estate. We talked about that recently as well, and they really want her to go into that compensation fund, and this survivor is saying, F you. We aren't having any part of it. We're going forward with our suit. And the estate is trying to fight back like usual, but this time, I don't think Indyke and Khan have the teeth or the claws to do it, to fight back right. Unless the judge keeps giving them stays here, eventually they're going to have to be sat down and deposed, and when that happens, it is going to be a bad day for Darren Khan, for Indyke. They have done everything they can to make these cases as difficult as possible for the survivors, so the survivors feel like they have no real choice but to submit to the fund and postpone the proceedings indefinitely, Glassman wrote in a letter to Judge Freeman on August 12th. He also accused the estate lawyers of belittling Doe simply because she is exercising her constitutional right to pursue a legal claim against those responsible for causing her unimaginable harm. Right. She has the right to pursue it any way that the law says. I don't want to hear anything about steering her to the compensation fund. If that's not what she wants to do, then that's not what she wants to do. Let her fight it out however she wants to fight it out. I think the survivors have earned that right. In a letter response filed with the court estate lawyer Mary Grace Metcalf, disputed Glassman's allegations that the estate had belittled the alleged survivor as completely untrue. We have done no such thing, and the inclusion of this claim by plaintiff's counsel further highlights their lack of good faith in these discussions. Epstein estate attorney Mary Grace Metcalf wrote, "Of the more than 30 women who brought legal claims against Epstein's estate following his death last year, Doe is the only accuser who has declined to put her lawsuit on hold to pursue an alternative resolution via the Epstein Victims Compensation Fund, a voluntary, non-adversarial program that began evaluating claims in June." But also remember that with that, accepting money from that does not mean you can't criminally go after anybody else. That just means you can't sue anybody else in this case, right? So it doesn't mean if you accept money from this fund that you can't provide witness testimony against someone like Maxwell. During a hearing in the case earlier this month, Bennett Moskowitz, a lawyer for the estate, advocated for putting the litigation on hold while Doe submits a claim to the compensation fund, arguing that it was a very sensible thing to do. Well, that's fine and well in your opinion, but again, if Doe decides that's not the route she wants to go, then that's nobody's business. Freeman will make a decision on Maxwell's motion to stay the case after receiving written arguments from the parties over the next several days. If she grants Maxwell's request, all documents, exchanges, and depositions, included Indyke's, would likely be on indefinite hold. That would be such garbage. I really hope that Deborah Freeman does the right thing in this case and follows Preska and Nathan and makes all of this stuff public, because Indyke is certainly a big-time piece to this puzzle. Maxwell's criminal trial isn't set to begin until July 2021. Glassman told ABC News that Doe intends to oppose Maxwell's motion and will urge Freeman to allow the case to continue. "We are disappointed the Epstein estate is doing everything it can to prevent key witnesses from speaking the truth about what happened to our client and other survivors. But we respect the judge's order and look forward to resetting Darren Indyke's deposition again real soon," Glassman said. Boy, I would love to see that. I hope that becomes public knowledge, because Indyke is a huge piece. I know I keep saying that here, but he really is. And more scrutiny needs to be put on Indyke, and harder questions most assuredly need to be asked. Doe's lawsuit alleges that she is the first known child victim of Epstein and Maxwell. According to her civil complaint, after first meeting them at a music camp in Michigan, a months-long grooming process continued after she returned home to Florida, where Epstein had a seaside estate on Palm Beach Island. Doe's father had recently passed away, the complaint said, creating an opportunity for Epstein and Maxwell to fill the void. And we've seen that over and over. These guys will do whatever it takes to get one of these susceptible and vulnerable girls to trust them. They will groom them over weeks, months, whatever it takes to get people to believe that they care about them, that these girls are part of their life. And then that's when the abuse occurs. And then they normalize it. Epstein gave himself the name of Doe's godfather while Maxwell acted like an older sister to her, her complaint said. They took her to the movies, went shopping with her, and lounged around Epstein's estate with her. Doe, now 40, alleges the abuse escalated over the next few years as Epstein and Maxwell asserted more and more control over her life and aspirations. Epstein paid for voice lessons, private high school tuition, and even co-signed a lease on a New York City apartment for Doe and her mother, according to her complaint. And that is all part of the normalization process. That is all part of making her and her family more comfortable and, in turn, giving Epstein and Maxwell more access to this girl so they can continue the abuse. She claims the abuse occurred at Epstein's homes in Florida, New York, and his ranch in New Mexico, and that she would often travel to those locations with Epstein and Maxwell on one of Epstein's private jets. Epstein's system of abuse was facilitated in large part by his co-conspirator and accomplice, Maxwell, who helped supply him with a steady stream of young and vulnerable girls, the complaint said, many of whom were fatherless like Jane Doe and came from struggling families. Again, 100% the kind of girls that they liked. And they would go to these low-income neighborhoods in Palm Beach and other places and find these girls. And to you or I, $200 might not seem like a lot of money. It might not seem like shit. But when you're poor, you come from a broken home, and say maybe your mom's only making $200-300 a week on her paycheck, $200 is quite a large amount of money. And then you hear all you got to do is show up at this dude's house and give him a massage? Hell yeah, sign me up. I'll go give this dude a massage for $200. I got to go to the mall and get me some new clothes. Me and the girls are going out this weekend. Then you get there, you find out it's not just a massage, but you're in that position already. The money's there, and before you know it, these little 16-year-old girls, 15-year-old girls are being groomed and abused by Epstein and Maxwell. All because scumbags like Darren Indyke helped facilitate it. Let's not forget that key part of it. Maxwell was arrested by federal authorities in New Hampshire on July 2nd and is facing a 6-count federal indictment alleging that she conspired with Epstein in a multi-state sex trafficking scheme involving 3 unnamed minor victims between 1994 and 1997. She has pleaded not guilty and is being held without bail pending a trial scheduled for next summer. Ghislaine Maxwell, and this trial is going to be bombshell, can't miss TV. And folks, I plan on being there in person. I want to be there when she gets sentenced. So I have it all set up already. I'll be in New York for the duration of the trial, staying with some family members. I've hooked up already with a photographer from New York who so graciously reached out to me. And her and I are going to work together when I get to New York, her documenting everything in photograph form while I continue to cover the case the way we have been. So I'm really looking forward to that portion. I'm really looking forward to when we get towards the portion of justice in this case. But until then, it is time for all of us to put our foot down on the gas, all the way down to the floor, and demand people like Darren Indyke face justice. If you'd like to contact me, you can do that at Bobbycapucci@protonmail.com. That's BOBBYCAPUCCI@protonmail.com. You can also find me on Twitter at BOBBY_CAPUCCI. All of the links that go with this episode can be found in the description box. All right, everybody. We will be back later on to do it all over again.